Well, what's going on, family? This is Dr. Joshua L. Mitchell, and I am sitting across from the desk from my normal co-host for our Day 31 podcast, Deacon Wynn. How you doing? We call it a Deac on the podcast. How you doing, Deacon Wynn?
I am doing fine.
All right.
It's good to be here.
Come on now.
Special presentation.
We've got a special presentation. So, as many of you all who are members of the church know, normally in the month of August is our anniversary experience. And I like to take the month of August to do a series of some sort for Bible study. I normally take the whole month. And sometimes it's been a Bible study series. And one year we did an interview. In fact, the first year of my pastorate at the end, Dr. Peyton McCoy and I got together in a similar format. We did something called Year One, and we just talked. We just spent those few weeks talking through various different areas. And so I thought that this would be a good idea to revisit that format for our Wednesday Bible study series. So you all are watching via YouTube or Facebook, maybe even making this available through our podcast. But to just have a conversation over these next few weeks and break that down and talk about various different things that maybe some of the membership have been wanting to know, some things that you want to talk about. But I thought it'd be cool to have the opportunity to talk to you because of our Christian educational format and platform that we have through our podcast, which we do this every month, walking through our sermon series and some of those themes. And so if you hadn't had a chance yet to tap in to our podcast, we want you to take advantage of that and to tap in to the Day 31 podcast. And you can listen to that wherever podcasts are hosted, as well as normally our church website. You can link to it. And the newest one is up already for last month. So you want to check that out.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Already up. So I want you to take advantage of that. But I wanted to sit down and have this conversation with Deacon Wynn, and I am going to try to answer as much as I can and just have a conversation like we do on Day 31.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, and I have some prepared questions, little ideas, but as we go on the podcast, sometimes we just
go off.
Yes, we do. So we'll see what happens this morning.
All right.
You ready to start?
I'm ready. Let's jump in.
Okay. My first question I want to ask you, let's imagine that someone doesn't know Joshua L. Mitchell. I don't know, may have been under a rock somewhere. Because, because you're well known.
People that don't know Joshua.
But let's say they don't. How would you describe yourself, or what would you say to introduce yourself in maybe 10 to 20 words?
Ooh, 10 to 20 words. Son of Marlo and Pam. Husband of Dr. Lori, Dada to Jaden and Jordan, pastor of 31st Street, lover of God.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay, so diving, I want to talk about what I call space and place.
Okay.
All right. D.C., Baltimore, Richmond, Houston, that's college, growing up, all of those things all together. So I want to talk about that and maybe looking at how Richmond compares to those places. And maybe if you want to delve into what it was like at different points of your life as a child growing up, college student, newlywed, and now pastor here in Richmond. I know that's a lot there, but take it, you always can take it and put it together.
Okay. Well, pull me back if I get too far out.
All right.
Bring me back to the question. So yeah, significant spaces and places. I would say, people ask me like, what's home? And of course, I grew up in Baltimore, specifically Baltimore County, the Woodlawn, Catonsville area, Baltimore County. So Maryland is home. It's where I was born. It was where I was reared. But I also consider DC home. My upbringing in the church is DC. My college days in DC, I met Dr. Lori in DC. And so I spent a significant amount of time, the first 22 years of my life, connected to DC in some way, through church. And when I was going to church, before my dad was the pastor, he was the chairman of the deacon board, and my grandfather served as pastor. And so we were down there 3-4 times a week. We were going up and down 95 3-4 times a week. So I spent as much social time, I think, in DC as I did in Maryland. Okay. Maybe I hope that's not an unfair statement, but I think that it is. And then, of course, spent 4 years in DC as a Howard student and living on campus. Mm-hmm. So DC is home, and then I came straight to Richmond. So I spent 3 years in seminary at Richmond, and I was not at that time at Virginia Union, we had 2 main tracks for Masters of Divinity students. We had students who were what they call traditional students, okay, who did daytime hours, and many of us who were part of the TH program, we called it Traditional Student Program. We lived on campus. So my first year I had an apartment, and then was able to move on campus and got student housing. And then the third year I was actually a RA. So I spent 3 years living in Richmond. The non-traditional program, a lot of students would travel back and forth from wherever they were coming from. Okay. And this is pre, Zoom and all of the ways that technology has kind of made education accessible now. At that time, people would just get in their car from New Jersey, or my father from Baltimore. He was a non-traditional student, and they would do that all year for 3 years. They would be down here, maybe a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and do their classes and go back and preach and go to work and do all the things they had to do. Mm-hmm. So I was fully immersed here in Richmond. I wasn't non-traditional. I was here. I was living on campus. I was here in the city, tutored in the city while I was a student, and worked in some of the schools. So Richmond is home, and then left and went to Texas. And the first part of that journey was Galveston, Texas. My wife was in medical school at UTMB, and we got married after her first year of medical school. So she did 3 years there, and then did her residency as well at UTMB. But we lived in Galveston for maybe a year when we first got married. And so when we got married, I just left seminary. We graduated in May, and then we got married in June. And so then I moved down to Texas. But we spent about a year in Galveston on the island, as far south as you can go. And then got the opportunity to work at Wheeler, and spent the next almost 7 years in the Houston area, or we lived in, one of the southern suburbs of Houston, about a 5-minute drive to the city limits, but we were just outside of that. But Houston became home. So, and then I was called back to Richmond. So we've had the opportunity, I think I've had the opportunity to find home now in 4 primary places. Mm-hmm. Okay. Baltimore is home. It's where my childhood house is, and specifically the county area. So didn't really grow up a city boy in that way for Baltimore City, but still find, Baltimore City and Baltimore County is home and familiar. But probably feel a stronger pull to Richmond, and then to Houston. I think those are where I feel most home now. So anytime I'm traveling to preach, teach, do anything mm-hmm. in Houston, I feel like I'm back home. And now, my literal home is here. Okay. With my name on the mortgage is here.
All right.
So
that counts.
This counts for something. Yeah. So I really, between, and to compare them, I think you asked about the difference. I think Houston, DC is the busiest of those for me. Um, the traffic and people moving in and out trying to get downtown to the Capitol and all the DC workers and all that kind of stuff. And I am not a congestion person. I'm not a crowd person. So I at least enjoyed just living space, DC.
Okay.
It's too crowded for me. I wouldn't do well in terms of enjoying the living experience in a place like, New York or, those high volume places. So Houston is a huge city, but it's spread out.
Okay.
So it doesn't feel like you're on top of each other like it feels like when you're in DC. And so even in DC, I had a car, but I wasn't using it. We took the metro everywhere because you're just on top of each other. I think the comparison would be that DC is the busiest. And of course you got your movers and your shakers there. Houston is the biggest of those cities that I've been in. There are really like 5 different downtowns in Houston. You have like downtown and you have the medical center and you have, the Galleria, and they're all like cities unto themselves, in my opinion. They're like downtowns. They're like Baltimore downtown in 5 different places in Houston proper. So it's the most spread out city that I've been in. And I love, what I love about Houston is, it has all of the city elements. You can go to a basketball game. You got the Houston Rockets. You can go to a football game. You have the Houston Texans. You can go to the baseball game. You can go to all the concerts. They're going to have all the concerts. All the artists are going to come through Houston. All the things that you love, entertainment-wise, big school district, all of those things are in Houston, but it's not as congested.
Do you miss that?
I miss the basketball, maybe. I enjoyed, and shout out to, I had a good friend who worked, or have a good friend, Reverend Benson, who worked for the Rockets, and we would get tickets to the games, and he always made sure, like, when the Wizards came to town, because that's my team, the Washington Wizards, growing up, we had a little small season ticket package where they would come to Baltimore, because they used to be the Baltimore Bullets, and so my dad had a little ticket plan for us. So I'm a Washington Wizards, Washington Bullets, Baltimore Bullets fan. So whenever they would come to the city, my boy would set us up real nice to go to the Rockets. I miss that kind of thing sometimes, but I was so busy working that I didn't get to, go to a lot of football games, especially not NFL. I've never been able to get into the NFL in a serious way because my life has always had Sundays as a worship and work day. And so in Houston, we were doing 4 or 5 services a Sunday. So there was no way I was getting to the Texans game unless it was preseason and we were going on a Saturday, or that rare Monday night game. So I can't say I miss that, but I do miss the access to the major sports teams. If you want to, we got to drive up to DC or we go to the Squirrels game, but I'm not a huge baseball fan.
Okay.
And I think the major concerts, I still will go, but you got to drive up to DC, I am glad, though, the Altria tends to have, some good stuff this month. I think my man PJ Morton is coming to town, and we see, the shows that come in, Lion King or Color Purple was here. When certain things come in, we try to go. That's one of the things we enjoy. So I would say, to that point, I would say that Richmond is the middle ground for all of the cities I've been in. You get a little bit of the city life and the access to entertainment and things that I enjoy because, really VCU basketball is just a step away from professional basketball, especially if you talk about the Wizards. No shade. I love the Wizards. But we weren't very good last year. So you can see winning basketball in a nice arena. It's pretty close, but I can still go to a concert. I can still go to a play, a musical, or whatever the case may be, and I can get to where I need to get to just about anywhere in about 20 to 25 minutes, and that is the difference.
Yes. Okay.
You cannot do that in DC. and I could not do that in Houston. So being able to get from home to the church normally in about 17 minutes is a blessing.
Okay.
And something that I embrace. So I think it is, for me at this stage in my life, like having small children, I like the pace of Richmond. It's fast enough that if we want to get into it, we can, but it's slow enough. I'm not worried about traffic, and it feels, familiar for me. I don't know how my family feels, but it feels familiar, feels safe. It feels, I don't.
And I don't want you to speak for Dr. Lloyd.
Yeah, I can't speak for them.
Sort of, in a sense, sort of.
Yeah, it feels cool. It feels cool. We're good.
But one thing you mentioned, what about weekends? Because your weekends, a lot of sports activities and whatever, concerts. But weekends, you work.
Yeah.
You're planning your messages, and of course, I know you're doing that during the week too. But what's the challenge like there? How do you have your balance there?
So that's a great question. My normal weekend, and I've been trying to do a much more intentional job about working ahead as best I can. Now, that's always the plan. The execution is normally not quite as planned, but for me, I try to use Fridays as the primary writing day for Sunday. I'm researching throughout the week. I'm thinking through the message. And as we've said on the podcast, on a high level, I've thought through where we're going in that retreat that I do every year. That it's been extremely helpful. And any pastor preacher that's watching, I highly recommend taking some time to plan out. And actually it was Dr. Lance Watson who put the bug in my ear about the importance of series planning. Like you can do a deeper dive, where you're going. That's sometimes the hardest part. And I've said that on the podcast is, okay, you finish, where are we going next week? But having a plan and a series where this is the concentrated thought helps you to do that, and it helps you to build an idea over the course of time. Because we can't just hear something one time and remember it. A lot of times we need reinforcement. I think I got caught out. So anyway, the Fridays tend to be the writing day where I do the most work on the sermon. And of course, it spills over into Saturday. 80% of the time it's going to spill over into Saturday. I'm not going to finish Friday. But the hope is that I can do as little work towards the sermon on Saturday so that there is some time to play with my boys.
Daddy, I want to go to the park.
Yeah.
How do you?
Park, splash pad, the pool, the whatever. I want to, as best I can, try to do that. And normally on Saturdays, there's something happening at the church. So this is a great example. We have, as we've built up our nonprofit, we normally have once a month a nonprofit meeting on a Saturday. We have deacon training that we're doing this month, baptism training. There's always something that I'm doing church related. Funerals are happening once or twice a month. We just happened at the time of this recording, we're going to do all three of those this particular Saturday that's coming up. So I'm normally spending part of my day doing church work on Saturday in any capacity, in any week, any given week. But I want to save, after nap time, I like to think of it for the boys and for my family, and being able to do something that is just fun, and just hang out. So that kills Saturday, that kills Friday. And Sunday is Sunday, Sunday, my normal routine, and I'm up anyway, normally by 6:30, because the boys wake up and they're ready to go. So I'm up, I'm shaving my head, I'm listening to my worship music, I'm, getting clean and dressed and all that kind of stuff. And I'm normally in the church, trying to get settled, by 8:30. I'm 8 is ideal, 8:15 is ideal, but I'm normally here by 8:30. Because I need some time to prep and center and review and read. And What tends to happen is if there are issues happening,
Mm-hmm.
those knocks on the door start happening around 9:45. So if I'm going to have prep time that's quiet,
Okay.
8:30 normally is when that happens for me. So that's kind of become our rhythm. And we're here until sometimes 1, then we're going to eat because daddy's hungry and everybody's hungry. So we're going to go eat after church and we take a nap. And the day is pretty much gone. The afternoon, we're trying to do some family time stuff. So to your point about the weekends, it's not I don't get to do normally the concerts on Fridays and Saturdays and going out to the festival and things like that. It's normally pretty solid. And so the balance, when you talk about balance, it's really trying to use Monday as a rest day. Really trying to use Monday as a day off, if you will, as my Sabbath, and really trying to protect that. We talked about that my first year, and tried to teach around the importance for all of us to have Sabbath.
Yeah.
And for those that work in churches, particularly preachers, and I would also say like primary musicians and singers in very big productions, that takes a lot out of you. That's not a rest day, Sunday. For me, it's a work day for me.
All right, sure.
And so having Monday most weeks to don't do anything. I don't want to take a call. I don't want to take an email. It's just stuff I want to do that has nothing to do with the church or a sermon or anything like that. Now, of course, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes I'm at a revival. Sometimes I'm going to a conference, but most of the time I'm trying to protect Monday and making that the day for fun and my own, recharging and being able to move.
Now, I know life is life, but I wonder if it will be more challenging as your boys get older. Have you talked to anyone who said, and then their activities, will they be in sports or something that then may create a challenge maybe for the weekend?
Yeah, I think it is inevitable, even now, with the oldest heading to big school, as we call it. I'm thinking about, he needs to do some extracurricular stuff. And part of why he hasn't been in a whole lot of it, I would say for me, is just it is the work schedule and the travel schedule and wanting to make sure I can be in as much as I can. So, we're having conversations about that and being thoughtful about what makes sense. Thankfully, I guess in my case, my mother-in-law has been amazing in terms of being a helpful support system for us, so that, as daddy is working and mommy is working, we've got a backup. So I always tell people we're a group of 5 now. We're a family of 5. We move around that way, but she's been absolutely incredible in being an extra support to their lives and to help us to manage our schedules and still make sure they can do the things they need to do.
That's great.
Yeah.
I want to flip a little bit now to, of course, we've been talking about church items also, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. This past year, we've been talking about the culture, and we've been looking at vibrant worship and excellence and a welcoming congregation and innovation. With some innovation going on even as we're taping this session here, this presentation. Do you want to talk about any of the projects going on? What's next for 31st Street? Maybe even some things maybe you've seen, thought about, that you feel comfortable sharing right now about 31st Street?
Sure. So let me talk about the culture piece first, and then I'll probably move into kind of what excites me about what we got going on.
Great.
But the culture was important. If people have been keeping up with our church themes, we've been building towards something since I started. We started with, plopping in 2 weeks, really called 2 weeks before the pandemic started on March 2nd, 2020. So there wasn't a church year theme from me that year. But right after that was the year of imagination. You know, we were looking at what is the church that we think we want to build. And then we went from imagining it to examination. All right, so let's look at the ground. What's here? What needs to be torn down? What needs to be repaired? What needs to be built? And so we spent that year of examination. Then the next year, I believe, was the year of the foundation, a firm foundation. So all of these themes for the first 4 years we were moving towards the building of something, right? And I was convicted that by God, it was like, you could go from building the foundation, because from an architectural standpoint, you lay the foundation after you have your plan, you examine the properties, you have your plan, you set the foundation first, and then you begin to build on top of that foundation. But the tug on my heart was, okay, but what are we inviting people to? And as important as it is to build structures and systems and all these things, the culture of the people that are on the inside that folks will meet, you know, and it's not if our aesthetics look good, but our internal culture is not matching, you know, I think it stunts growth and it turns people away. So this really 4 or 5 year, because the way it kind of worked, we're kind of in year 4.5.
4.5, okay.
Right. We just kind of celebrate every August, but that's normally about 5 or 6 months after really starting the work. So it's about now, what is our ethos and what are our key values and our key principles that define who we are as a culture in this season, right? And thankfully and tragically, I don't have a point of reference that I physically saw, except the one time I came as a candidate for what culture was. And so in some ways that's a handicap for me. And in other ways, it's a beautiful freedom, because we just get to start from where we started, you know?
Okay.
And so, you know, beginning the year with vibrant worship is the first element. That was the first priority for me, that let's get worship to a place where, one, it's God-centered. So it's God-centered vibrant worship. And even as I reflect on shifts in culture, you know, I can acknowledge things that are different that intentionally, I think, were moves for me to make it a bit more God-centered. So we don't have long presentations. Okay. Even if it's for me, we don't have long presentations. Yeah. Because I want to make sure worship is pointing to God and flowing, that we're not doing a whole lot of extra stuff in worship that distracts from what we came here to do. And I know that is and maybe was a point of tension, you know, for some, because it's different. You know, we have a culture of celebration at our church, but for me, and that kind of comes from Dr. Cosby, the need to center God in what we do in those ways.
Yes.
Yes.
I think also the pandemic might have helped with that, allowing some of those shifts to be easier, because we were away from the sanctuary of normal church activities. So I'm wondering if that helped also to make it different.
Yeah, I definitely, it was, some of the shifts that we were able to make early, it did help that we were away and we could just play with some things.
Yeah.
Out of necessity, you know, we could play with some things.
Yes.
And so now, I think now that we are in what some people would say, you know, post-pandemic, I like the way that Dean Guns from Virginia Union puts it. He calls it, we are not post-pandemic, we were pandemic impacted. Like, it's not leaving us.
All right.
And, you know, to that point, you know, I want us to be thoughtful and careful how we move, because COVID is still moving around. And, but I think that it just gave us the opportunity out of necessity to up our innovation. You know, I know that when we started, we didn't have a functional website up. We didn't have a functional YouTube page or Facebook page or social media in that kind of way. And so we had to do that right away. We had to get, you know, our virtual giving, which has been a major vehicle for giving now.
Did that surprise you?
That we didn't have it?
Yes.
It did not surprise me, because as a candidate, I couldn't find us.
Right.
So I knew it wasn't there.
All right.
So it didn't surprise me. It surprises me the reach that we have now, you know, sometimes. I haven't looked at the numbers, but we have a nice community, a nice online community that is faithfully engaged with us. And I don't think we always think about that, but I think to be able to build it the way that we slowly built it when we didn't have it, you know, 4 years in, 4.5 years in, is amazing when you compare it to other churches who've had it for a while.
All right.
You know, I think. So I've been grateful for that. And the pandemic definitely helped with innovation from a technology perspective, but also it made us kind of cut the fat from worship.
Okay, yes.
And really get to, I think, is a nice groove that we have now with our current order of worship. And it won't always be the same. You know, this summer I was thinking about flipping some stuff around, and I just didn't get around to doing it.
Okay.
But I want us to be, when it's truly God-centered worship, I think that it becomes an opportunity to see God in people in a different kind of way. So we aren't stuck in one way of doing a thing. And I've thought about ways that we engage, you know, laity. We're very heavy now with officers and ministers in our worship experience, but I've even thought about, what does it look like to throw some lay members in that just are participating in some of these things? Because ultimately it's not about me. It's not about the officers. It's not about, you know, the minister of the day or the deacon of the day or whoever the singer is. It's about, how do we best uniquely and communally worship God in a vibrant way. So I've been pleased at the way that we've progressed in our worship experience. I think it's a very different, certainly from the pandemic version of it. I can't speak to the pre-pandemic version of it. You might be able to speak more to that side of the differences between what it was like before the pandemic started. But I definitely have seen the difference while trying to put a little bit of something for everybody.
Okay.
You know, so it's important to me that we have our hymn in the morning, and we still have our hymn most Sunday mornings, that we have that as a part of worship. It's important to me that we have a praise and worship song. It's important to me that we throw some gospel in from time to time. Okay. It's important to me that the kids still get up and do their thing on second Sundays, and maybe even seeing more youth participation is something that we'll see in year 5, because I want something for everybody. Okay. We are trying to intentionally be, which is one of our culture values, intentionally intergenerational. And so, you know, I think we've seen that.
Yeah. I think